In recent months, we've witnessed a wave of shootings at our nation's high schools, and each new eruption of violence brings comparisons to another murderous rampage at Columbine High School in Jefferson County, Colorado. It's been 2 years since Columbine, and today, many people, especially some parents of the murdered children, still believe the worst school massacre in American history might have been avoided if the sheriff's department and the school authorities had done their jobs. We've been investigating the shootings at Columbine for the past 6 months, and tonight you'll hear new and surprising information about what happened there. Some of that information was in the sheriff's files, undisclosed, until we went to court to have it released. And some of it comes from 2 former security officials at the school district who say that 8 months before the shootings, they gave Columbine a plan which they say might have prevented the killings, a plan they say the school all but ignored. You'll also hear from key figures who haven't felt comfortable speaking until now about what happened on that terrible day. On the morning of April 20th, 1999, 18-year-old Eric Harris was in the garage of his home filling duffel bags with bombs and rigging weapons in his trench coat. A few miles away, 17-year-old Dylan Klebold was preparing his own weapons. He wrote out his schedule for the day. Park cars, set car bombs for 11:18. When first bombs go off, attack. Have fun. It was a warm spring day and a lot of students were eating lunch outside. Danny Rohrbaugh, a freshman, was outside with some friends. It was 11:19. For the next few minutes, the students in the cafeteria heard gunfire. As a school security camera recorded them, some of those students looked out to see Danny lying dead on the sidewalk. He'd been shot 3 times. The attack on Columbine had begun. When the shooting started, teacher Rich Long was working in the library.
The assistant librarian tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "You know, Rich, I would like you to come and look at this because I don't know if it's real." We went to the window. I saw Dylan with a gun in his hand and it was smoking, and I could see Eric firing some shots. And I turned to her and I said, "This is very real."
At 11:22, as students hid under tables, a cafeteria worker was already on the phone with a 911 operator.
So far they're outside. I know there's one kid that's been shot, and there's still shots going on. Shots fired, one down.
I said, "We've got to get up and get out of here." Maybe 5, 10 kids followed me out that front door down to the first landing of the cafeteria area. That's when the kids that were hiding under the tables started streaming towards me, 300 to 400 kids.
Just outside the cafeteria, Harris and Klebold had killed 2 students and wounded 6 more. Then they turned away from their victims and headed for the school's west entrance. An art teacher, Patty Nielsen, was on hall duty just inside the west doors when she saw Eric Harris.
He looked at us, smiled, and shot. I was grazed by a bullet in my shoulder.
But he looked right at you and smiled.
Yeah.
And shot.
Yeah.
As the gunman headed into the school, business teacher and coach Dave Sanders rushed through the cafeteria, telling the remaining students to stay down. Then he headed upstairs to warn others.
And just as Dave turned that corner, that's where Dave was shot.
He was your good friend?
He was. We coached together for probably 7 years. He was in my wedding. He was one of my groomsmen, and, you know, just had a great heart for kids.
Did he go down when he was shot?
He went down. And at that point, I was on my hands and knees, and I yelled to Dave. I said, "Dave, you've got to get up."
Mike Rotola was taking a test in Science Room 3 when Dave Sanders came in.
He took 2 steps and he fell flat on his face. And there was blood coming out of the front of his mouth and also out of his back and his neck.
What did you guys do?
A lot of people started crying, and all we could really do was give them our shirts so they could try and stop the bleeding.
He looked up at me and he said, "You know, I think they shot me in the mouth." And I said, "You're going to be okay." And he goes, "I don't think so. I'm not doing so well." And I said, "You know, we need to get you some help."
My thought was just to warn kids. I remember running into the library and immediately being hit by the fact that the library was full of children.
And then you called 911?
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson County 911.
Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window.
Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the school is in a panic, and I'm in the library. I've got students down under the tables, kids. Heads under the tables. Kids are screaming. We need police here.
Okay, we're getting them there.
He turned the gun straight at us and shot, and my God, the window went out. And the kid standing there with me, I think he got hit.
Okay, we've got help on the way, ma'am.
Did you think help was on the way?
Oh, yeah, because I was on the phone to the operator. She says, help is on the way, and yeah, I thought, they were going to be there right away.
Police were at the school right away. Within 5 minutes of the first shots fired, the sheriff's deputy assigned to work at the school was in the west parking lot. He exchanged gunfire with Harris, who retreated into the school.
Got a couple shots off of the shooter on the southeast end. It's a big gun.
Southwest side was a large weapon. Potential unit 71 is under fire. He advised the suspect just ran into the building.
That deputy was soon joined by 6 other policemen who took positions around the building. None of them entered the school, where Harris and Klebold were heading toward the library, shooting in the halls and throwing bombs into the cafeteria below.
As this is happening, we're hearing more shots, we're hearing screaming, we're hearing kids running in the halls, the shooters yelling. The library is where they came next. I ducked down under the counter. I could hear them walking past because everyone else in the library was absolutely silent.
Evan Todd was the first student shot in the library.
Eric Harris was standing in the hallway, and he cocked a shotgun and shot at me. Hit my back, my neck, my face.
And what happened then?
They shot again. I felt it through the desk again. They were throwing out questions like, are you a jock? Do you believe in God? And every time I heard a question, I heard a gunshot. So I pulled my knees up to my chest, and I was just bracing myself for another shot. And Dylan said to Eric, I'm not going to take him. If you want him, you can have him.
They were angry, and they thought they were funny. They would laugh and hoot, and they would say cruel things to students, and they were trying to humiliate them. And then you'd hear them ching ching the guns, and you'd hear one yell at a student, and then you'd hear another, then you'd hear gunshots, and you'd figure that they just shot that kid.
Sophomore Kelly Fleming usually spent her free time in the library. 5 months after the shootings, her parents, Don and Dee Dee, heard tapes of Patty Nielsen's 911 call.
They were very difficult to listen to.
And what did you hear on those tapes?
Terror, complete horror.
Okay. Oh, God. Stay on the line with me.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
I listened to those. I think from the beginning, she's alive, Kelly's alive, she's all right, she's waiting for someone's going to come. She thinks to get her, to help her, to save her. And I keep thinking from minute to minute, she's still alive, and then it hits a point in the tape where she's dead.
You've said that when you heard those tapes, you began to doubt that the sheriff's department had done everything it could to save those children. What made you think that?
There was no one in that school that had a gun other than the 2 killers, and no one pursued them. No one tried to engage them.
And in essence, they chased them into the school and then let them just kill at will, knowing that they were killing.
For almost 20 minutes, she waited. 20 minutes, that's a long time for someone to have the opportunity to come in and make a difference.
I've set my timer and sat in my kitchen, ticking off how long that is. It's an incredibly long time. I'm yet to be convinced that something could not have been done in that length of time.
Lauren Townsend, the class valedictorian, was also studying in the library that day. She played on the volleyball team coached by her mother, Dawn Anna.
Lauren respected authority. I'm positive Lauren never doubted that when an adult told her help was on the way, help was coming.
The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office declined to speak with us, but in a letter, Sheriff John Stone described the Columbine attack as a unique set of circumstances, the magnitude of which no one had dealt with before. He also cited some of the obstacles that kept his men from entering the building right away, including bombs, booby traps, and a lack of information about how many gunmen were in the school.
They say that they had to have a safe route in there to get to them, and they weren't sure of what they had.
Lauren's stepfather, Bruce Beck.
But at the same time, they're listening to kids being shot and murdered inside that library over a 911 call, and their job is to protect people.
And if you're going to tell my child to stay put, you're coming to get her, then either go in there and do something or take off the uniform and find another job. But that day you were a cop. And that day you chose to stand by and listen to homicide.
Ed, I don't know if you have children or not, but if you were there and your child was in that school, whether you had a gun or not, you'd have gone in after him.
But if they had gone in after Harris and Klebold,
I think it would have been totally different. Harris and Klebold would have had different targets to shoot at.
They would have been shooting at the cops instead of the kids.
Instead, they went into the library and took their time. Let's stop and reload. Let's tell a few jokes while we're reloading. They had no fear at that point that there was anybody that was going to engage them.
In his letter, Sheriff Stone said that by taking positions around the building and waiting for SWAT teams to arrive, his officers were doing what they were trained to do. He said they responded quickly, returned fire, deployed appropriately, and safely extracted hundreds of trapped and terrified students and teachers. He also asked us to talk to Larry Glick, who directs a national organization that trains SWAT teams.
There is not one officer that I know that responded there that would not have given his or her life for any child or teacher in there.
But just in terms of common sense, here's what you know. You've got kids dead and wounded outside. You've got at least 2 shooters inside with who knows how many unarmed kids. You've got armed cops outside. Aren't those kids better off if the armed cops go inside? Isn't that just common sense?
They believe that they really had 6 to 8 armed individuals inside there. And they felt that it was more reasonable to wait till additional personnel responded to move in.
What about the arguments that they make? We saw these 2 guys go in. We don't know how many more are inside. We could have been outgunned.
That's their job. When you hear kids screaming, knowing that they're being shot, when it talked about being outgunned, all my child had for defense was a pencil in her hand.
Then they were walking towards me, and they stopped, and one of them said, "Wait, there's one more thing," and came back and stood right in front of me, and their feet, his feet, were about this far from me, and he picked up a chair and smashed it on top of the counter.
When one of them says, "There's one more thing,"
I remember bracing myself for what it was going to feel like to have bullets going all through my body.
But instead of taking those last shots, Harris and Klebold walked downstairs to the school commons. They were in no hurry. That's Harris on the right shooting at a bomb they'd planted earlier. Now, on the left side of the screen, he stops for a drink. Klebold wandered through the cafeteria, then lobbed a pipe bomb toward the window. It started a fire which could be seen by police officers outside.
I've got a fire inside the building.
Okay, 149 has a fire in the building, northwest side.
When I got outside, there was a cop car sitting right outside with 2 cops standing behind it.
Did you see any of them make a move in the direction of the school to go in there?
No, I didn't.
Did they say specifically, we can't go in because?
Yeah, they said, we can't go in because we need to have orders to go in.
Did you tell them that there were other wounded students inside?
Yeah, I told them that there were students that had definitely been wounded in the library. And I told them that which door that I came out of where they could go in.
But no policeman went in that door, the shortest route to the library and to the science room where Dave Sanders lay wounded. When Evan Todd came out that door, there were at least 20 police officers surrounding the school. But by the time the first SWAT team was assembled and geared up to enter the building, it was 12:06, 47 minutes after the shooting had begun. That SWAT team entered on the side of the building farthest from Dave Sanders and from the library where some survivors lay hidden among the dead. You crawled into a cupboard there?
Yeah. And I stayed in there for the next 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours. And what do you hear going on outside?
Gunshots, bombs, helicopters, sirens, breaking glass. And I remember thinking that they were just kids. I knew they were kids. And thinking, come on, they ought to be able to take them down, you know?
But at noon, Harris and Klebold were still roaming the school, armed with enough ammunition to kill many more students. At least 75 police officers were outside when the gunman decided to head back upstairs and commit suicide. But the crisis didn't end with Harris and Klebold's suicides. In a moment, the hours that followed and the rescue that never happened. By the time Klebold and Harris committed suicide at 12:08, at least 75 police officers were surrounding Columbine High School. The first SWAT team had only been in the building 2 minutes. It would be nearly 3 hours before they would know the gunmen were dead.
We're making the approach to the high school now. We're just on front.
As the day wore on, hundreds of police and rescue workers responded to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department's call for help at Columbine High. Throughout the day, nearly 1,000 police officers and rescue personnel from 47 agencies arrived at the scene.
There is literally a scene of pandemonium out here with dozens of police, fire, paramedics, SWAT team members. They're all over here. Clearly, there are SWAT team members that are getting ready to move in on the school, but
many of those officers spent the entire day with nothing to do, waiting for an assignment from commanders on the scene.
I was at the office when it came in, shots being fired in the school.
Jefferson County Sheriff John Stone was in charge of the police response that day. Right away, Stone faced reporters' questions about why his officers didn't pursue the shooters into the school.
We had initial people on scene, but it was too dangerous we couldn't get into the buildings. Yeah. We were way outgunned.
He also explained what so many officers were doing outside the school.
We initially got some of the first injured ones out that were able to get away from the school, and then trying to find a location to operate really here and not get our people hurt.
Paramedics right now, emergency code 10, take an ambulance right now.
Paramedics and police rescued 6 wounded students lying outside the school building. But most of the wounded had to save themselves, making their own way to police and rescue vehicles.
Where's my brother? Your brother will be
Where
okay.
is my brother?
No, calm down.
Some of them, like senior Nick Foss, wanted to go back in to help.
He's my twin, man. He's my twin. They're going to find him. No.
While the crowd of reporters and worried parents grew outside the school, students and teachers in Science Room 3 struggled to get help for teacher Dave Sanders, who had been bleeding profusely since he was shot at 11:26. Melanie Polishuk, a sophomore, was in the room with him.
There seemed like there was a lot of officers walking around outside with nothing to do. And I don't know why they couldn't have sent maybe a few more people directly to come to our room.
Just before noon, Mike Rottola put a sign in the window. It said, "One bleeding to death."
One of the teachers grabbed a dry erase board and handed it to me, and I held it in the window.
Homemade sign, second floor, southwest corner, says I'm bleeding to death.
You knew that someone had seen that sign.
Yeah, and also news helicopters would fly up, film the sign, and fly off. And we knew they were doing this because we had the TV on the whole time, so we were watching, what was going on outside of the school.
The Jefferson County Sheriff's Command Post was well aware of Dave Sanders' condition and where he was.
Corner says I'm bleeding to death.
Since 11:42, a teacher in the room with Sanders had been on the phone with operators at Sheriff's headquarters. And once Mike Rottola put the sign in the classroom window, radio calls started coming from officers urging the command post to rescue him.
window, bleeding to death. They need to get a team up there.
In the window, clearly visible from a helicopter above, is a sign that says 1 bleeding to death, and you will not go into that building to save Dave Sanders.
Could be a trap, they say.
Okay, then you know right where the killers are, and you can go in and find them.
At 1:10 p.m., nearly 2 hours after the first shots were fired, a SWAT team finally entered the west side of the school building where injured victims were waiting for help. Immediately, they faced a maze of flooded rooms, fire alarms, and smoke. But worse than that, according to the members of that SWAT team who asked not to be named, the command post never told them there were injured victims in the library or the science rooms. At the same time, police dispatchers were telling the teachers and students with Dave Sanders that help was on the way.
And they'd say, oh, we'll be here in 20 minutes. So we'd, get ready and lay there, and then no one would come.
So this went on for 3 hours?
Yeah.
He was conscious almost the entire time. He towards the end, he was getting really cold.
He just kept saying, help me, and I got to get out of here.
And what did people say to him?
Show him a picture of his daughters. Tell him, you gotta be all right. Look at these 3 beautiful girls.
Across the hall, Rich Long was trapped in another classroom.
I finally got a call from Teresa Miller, who was with Dave at the time, and I said, well, how's he doing? Have they got to him? And she said, they haven't even come up yet. I said, you've got to be kidding me. It's 2:30. They haven't got to him?
As Dave Sanders lay bleeding, SWAT officers directly below him were evacuating classrooms full of children stranded on the first floor. Then they had to escort those children out of the cafeteria, past the dead bodies of their classmates, and on to safety. Larry Glick, an expert on SWAT tactics, says it was required procedure at that time for SWAT officers to clear each room before moving on to the next.
It's unfortunate that Mr. Sanders was not attended to immediately, but if you look at the priorities that the officers had who were searching that building and moving kids out, the kids were a priority.
If you've got a fire in one room and you suspect there may be fires in others, you don't search through every one of those rooms to see if there's an ember burning before you get to the fire and try and put it out.
Well, in this business, when you don't know how many suspects there are, you in fact do that.
For 2.5 hours, the first SWAT team searched classrooms on the side of the school farthest from where most of the shooting had taken place. A second team evacuated students and staff from the rooms around the cafeteria. When the sheriff's command post finally told that SWAT team to look for Dave Sanders, they didn't know where to go.
The party on the cell phone, now breathing again. Where are they?
The team that's working that wing of the school is still trying to work their way down there.
They still haven't been able to find him.
SWAT team officers finally reached Dave Sanders in Science Room 3 at 2:42, more than 3 hours after he'd been shot. They evacuated the kids right away, but held Sanders there to wait for a paramedic. That paramedic didn't arrive for another 42 minutes.
We said, well, can we carry him out? Let us carry him out. And they said, no, we need to get you out safely, and there's paramedics on the way right now.
Did you think everything was okay then?
I thought that they'd have him out in, 5 minutes.
And was Mr. Sanders conscious at that time?
When I left the room, he said, tell my girls I love them.
I thought he was going to make it, so there's really no doubt in my mind when he was still conscious, and he'd been alive for 3 hours. I thought he would have been okay.
But by the time a paramedic finally got to Dave Sanders at 3:24, he was already dead.
The sheriff's department has said that he could not have survived without immediate medical attention, that even if they had gotten to him sooner, that he would have died.
I mean, this man stayed alive till almost 4 o'clock. I don't know that David would have lived. I don't know that, nobody will ever know that. I would sure like to see him try, though.
Sanders was the last of 15 people to die at Columbine that day. 23 wounded were taken to hospitals. 6 had brain or spinal injuries. Several nearly bled to death.
They are all still listed in serious condition.
Doctors at 6 hospitals worked on wounded children all through the night and saved every one of them.
The parents are responding to Leewood Elementary. Leewood Elementary is what the parents are responding to.
Come into the library. I have an announcement.
At a nearby elementary school, Columbine parents waited for information about their children. Many were there for hours, looking for their kids to come in on school buses, listening for their names on the list of survivors.
Anna Kane, Jennifer Hodgson, Valerie Holland, Richard Hoover, Sunny Hope, Jessica...
Danny Rohrbaugh's parents, Sue Patrone and Brian Rohrbaugh, learned of their son's death on their own.
In my heart, I'm knowing things are not good. And Brian said the words to me, you know, I think we know that this is not going to have a good outcome.
When did the two of you find out that, in fact, he had been shot?
When we looked at the newspaper the next morning.
The newspaper?
There was a picture of Danny laying dead on the sidewalk.
He was the joy of my life. He was so kind to people. And he always just made me laugh. And I miss his smile so much. I miss everything about him.
2 days after the shooting, the coroner's office finally released the names of those Harris and Klebold had killed. Cassie Bernal, age 17, Kyle Velasquez, 16, Corey DePuter, 17, Stephen Kernow, 14, Kelly Fleming, 16, John Tomlin, age 16, William Dave Sanders, 47, Daniel Rohrbaugh, 15, Daniel Mauser, 15, Matthew Kechter, 16, Rachel Scott, 17, Isaiah Scholes, 18, Lauren Townsend, age 18.
When I think of her, I see her smiling. She didn't like people being unhappy. And the time she gave to us and to her friends was the greatest gift. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking, is that this gift that they all had, time has been taken.
When we come back, we'll talk to 2 former school officials who say the killings at Columbine might never have happened if the school had followed its own security plan. As Jefferson County school and police officials will tell you, it's awfully easy for outsiders to look at the Columbine tragedy and conclude it didn't have to happen. But in our 6-month investigation, we spoke to a number of people, insiders, people with first-hand knowledge of the events leading up to Columbine, who told us the killings might have been prevented. A year before the attack, Joe Schalmoser and Howard Cornell were worried that Columbine was just the kind of place where a school shooting might happen. They were in charge of security for the school district that included Columbine. After the shootings in Paducah, Kentucky and Jonesboro, Arkansas, they were afraid that one of their schools might be next.
Did you find any common elements in these?
Oh, yes. In fact, if you're in a white, suburban, middle-class, fairly large, complex school, you'd better have a plan for violence and threats of violence.
That's exactly what they had, a plan. In August of '98, a full 8 months before the attack on Columbine, Cornell and Schalmoser wrote a security plan that required school officials to notify and meet with parents and law enforcement officers as soon as they learned of a threat by any student to commit any act of violence. They say Columbine didn't follow the plan.
And how did you propose that the schools identify students who might be a problem?
When a sophomore or even a freshman says, I'm going to kill somebody and I've got a gun at home to do it, or I'm going to blow the place up, it's time to trigger this procedure and take action.
In the event that the kid initiates some behavior that pops one of those red flags up, then we need to move.
About the time Cornell and Schalmoser presented their security plan to Columbine, 2 of the school's juniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were coming to the attention of school and law enforcement authorities. At night, Harris and Klebold had been building an arsenal and making plans to use it, plans that Harris wrote about on the internet on his website. Our first true pipe bombs blew big, Harris writes. God, I can't wait till I can kill you people. I don't care if I live or die in the shootout. You all better hide in your houses because I'm coming for everyone soon, and I will be armed to the teeth, and I will shoot to kill, and I will kill everything. Brooks Brown was also a junior at Columbine in 1998. That March, he found his name on Harris's website. Harris was threatening to kill him.
When I first saw the web pages, I was utterly blown away. He's not saying like he's going to beat me up. He's saying he wants to blow me up, and he's talking about how he's making the pipe bombs to do it with.
He specifically states that he wants to kill Brooks, specifically states that they are making and detonating pipe bombs.
Did you see Brooks' parents, Randy and Judy Brown, say they were horrified by the website and frightened of Harris, who lived nearby. They decided to take pages from the website to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, where an investigator told them that Harris already had a criminal file. He and Dylan Klebold were on a form of probation for breaking into a van and stealing equipment.
So he knew that Eric Harris had broken into this van?
Yes. So he...
The same Eric Harris who
right,
made death
knew
threats
that.
against your son?
Absolutely, he knew that.
You went to them and said, here's a red flag.
More than a red flag, here were 3 felonies that we had turned into them, making and detonating pipe bombs and threatening my son's life, and they didn't pursue it. They didn't do their job.
I was utterly dumbfounded that they did nothing with the web pages. Eric was saying how he was going to blow people up. Hey, I'm making pipe bombs. I've got the designs for them on my website. I'm going to kill these people. Here's why. That's a level beyond making a joke.
At first, the Sheriff's Department denied its investigators had even met with the Browns in person. But we obtained this police paperwork showing those investigators not only met with Mrs. Judy Brown, but then worked on a warrant to search Eric Harris's home. Even more surprising, this document shows a sheriff's deputy found a pipe bomb consistent with the devices Harris described on his website. But the Sheriff's Department never searched or even visited the Harris home. It was April of '98, a full year before the Columbine massacre.
People are covering up everything that went wrong, and I want these lessons out there. They're doing studies, they're getting profiles, everybody's trying to get programs going and what we can do. Well, guess what? All the signs were there. You know what the lessons are? Do your job.
After their meeting with the Browns, sheriff's deputies did warn administrators at Columbine that Eric Harris might be making pipe bombs. But according to a school district official, Sally Blanchard, the school had no reason to look into the matter further.
Deans were told that there was an investigation underway, that they weren't to do anything, that it was informational on their part only. So they actually took no action because certainly they wouldn't have wanted to interfere with an ongoing investigation.
This is too important to say, oh, well, you're going to handle it. We'll get on to something else. It's much too important.
But isn't it fair to say that if the police come to the school and say, hey, we're investigating this kid because the kid's making pipe bombs. This is an FYI, so you know what's going on. That if I'm the school, I'm assuming that, okay, the cops are taking care of it.
No. You have to get the cop in there and say, what do you mean he's making pipe bombs? And where are they? And what is he doing with them?
If a sheriff's deputy told you that somebody at your school was messing around with pipe bombs, just common sense, wouldn't you want to know more about that?
I would have asked, first of all, if there was something that would lead me to believe that I needed to worry about our students in our school. There's not much else I could do other than have the information and be watching, being more vigilant about that student.
But if Columbine's administrators were being more vigilant about Eric Harris, they admit that didn't include speaking to his teachers, family, or friends about him. One of those friends, Nate Dykeman, told us Harris and Klebold were showing off their weapons to people long before they attacked Columbine.
One day Eric showed you a pipe bomb at his home.
Yes.
What'd you say?
I was kind of taken back. Things were starting to get kind of out of hand. Making little fireworks is one thing, but when you make things that can like blow half your body apart, that's out of most normal people's league.
Dykeman says Harris also kept what he called a hit list.
It was a little list of paper that he had kept in his wallet, just a list of names. He would update every day if somebody shoved them or somebody called him something, he would write their name down on it.
He was just a scary kid.
Devin Adams was a sophomore at Columbine in 1998 when she found her name on Harris's website on his hit list. In December of 98, you went to an assistant principal at the school and told her that you had been threatened by Eric Harris.
Yes.
What did you say to her?
I told her that Eric was intimidating, that he was threatening, that other students were feeling threatened by him. They did not feel safe in school around him, that it was not a safe environment when he was around.
And what did you want her to do? What did you think she would do?
I wanted her to call Eric in, maybe call his parents in, just talk to him. And I don't think it ever happened.
But that assistant principal denies Devin Adams ever spoke to her about Eric Harris.
I made an appointment, sat down, and I talked to her. I was serious, and she should have known that.
That was December. By then, Klebold and Harris had already bought a rifle, a semi-automatic pistol, and 2 sawed-off shotguns. Referring to a popular video game, Harris said in a tape he made before the shooting, "That shotgun is straight out of Doom. It's going to be like Doom."
In the video games that we all played, the sawed-off shotgun, that was their favorite weapon.
According to Nate Dykman, Harris and Klebold even made videotapes of themselves shooting their guns and played those tapes in school.
They were editing it in our video productions class.
What did you think that they were going to do with these guns?
They had told me that it was for target practice. I mean,
But you don't use a sawed-off shotgun for target practice.
Yeah, you don't, and that was odd, but Eric was an extreme person.
All of these things that people are pointing to now as red flags, the video in the classroom, the pipe bombs, the guns.
I figured if teachers are seeing this and numerous students are seeing all these signs, somebody else should be, worried about this. If nobody else is seeing anything wrong with this, why should I?
School officials say because of pending lawsuits, they cannot disclose whether any teachers saw videotapes of Harris and Klebold's guns.
What people saw in the school were that these two were going to classes every day. They had friends. They were turning in assignments. They were working towards higher grades in their classes. They were planning a future and going to the college or to the military.
And they're blowing up pipe bombs, they're shooting off shotguns. Are there other students doing that in your school?
I don't know.
Should you know? Would you want to know?
I would certainly want to know.
Should you have known then? Should someone have known?
Again, within what was happening.
But that's what's happening, Ms. Blanchard. I mean, does the school take any responsibility for failing to see how dangerous they might be?
There was no one in that school who had any indication that these 2 boys would become mass murderers.
In February of '99, Dylan Klebold turned in a story he wrote about an assassin in a black trench coat who shoots down students and bombs the city. The man unloaded one of the pistols across the fronts of the 4 innocents, Klebold wrote. The streetlights caused a visible reflection off of the droplets of blood. I understood his actions. Klebold's teacher later called it the most vicious story she'd ever read and voiced her concerns about it to Klebold's parents and his school counselor. But no school official ever looked into the matter, and it ended there. It was 2 months before the shootings. According to Howard Cornell, that story gave Columbine's administrators yet another opportunity to head off Klebold and Harris. And yet again, they missed it. In any of these instances, the essay that was written, the police investigating the pipe bombs, the girl who felt that she was threatened, in any of these instances, did Columbine follow the policies that you had laid out for the school district?
No, not one.
Why do you think Columbine didn't implement your recommendations?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Bradley.
We asked school district officials that question, and in a letter, they said Cornell and Schalmoser's plan applied only when a district employee becomes aware of a student who threatens to kill someone, a standard they say didn't apply to Harris or Klebold. But that's not what the plan says. Here's what it does say. The plan goes into effect when a student threatens to kill another student or commit any act of violence, and that standard did apply to Eric Harris. Where were Harris and Klebold's parents all this time? They have never spoken publicly about Columbine, but in police interviews, they said they had no idea about the arsenal of weapons their sons were amassing in their bedrooms, including knives, guns, cans full of gunpowder, coils of bomb fuse, and bombs, more than 100 of them, including pipe bombs, propane bombs, and homemade grenades. At night, while their parents were asleep, Harris and Klebold made videotapes in which they talked about all the weapons they had. Harris imagined his parents saying, "If only we had checked his room. If only we had asked more questions." 2 years after the shootings, families of the victims say they still don't know exactly what happened that day at Columbine and whether their children might have been saved. Sheriff John Stone isn't talking, not to the families, not even to a Colorado Governor's Commission investigating the shootings. The families have gone to court. They've filed 9 separate lawsuits against the Sheriff's Department, the school district, and the parents of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. And yet, in spite of all the unanswered questions, some good has come out of Columbine. Young people are speaking up when they see signs that other kids may be planning violence. And police throughout America are being trained to act immediately when a killer takes control of a building, and not to stand by and wait for the SWAT teams to arrive. Still, Columbine would seem to be the place where we can learn the most about school shootings and how to prevent them in the future. But 2 years have gone by, and some of those who know the most, school and police officials, are still not telling us everything they know. I'm Ed Bradley. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes 2. Now,